Hello and welcome to this episode of B2B Revenue Leaders. I'm your host, Dustin, and this episode is brought to you by Testimonial Hero. Testimonial Hero enables businesses to accelerate buyer journeys by closing trust gaps between them and their audiences with strategic, high-quality video testimonials. On this episode, I'm joined by Cait Porte, who is the CMO at Digibee, and we're going to be chatting about why prioritizing your customer experience needs to be more than just lip service and how buyers have higher expectations that you just need to meet nowadays. Hey, Cait, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to be talking about, it's kind of interesting actually, we're in similar roles, companies going through similar things, so I'm sure we'll be venting, discussing, brainstorming a little bit of all of the above.
Wait, this isn't a therapy session?
It turns into one sometimes. Yeah, I do my best. But I think the first topic I want to talk about is, and we kicked this around a little bit before the call, but the switch for marketing and sales focusing on the customer needs rather than shoehorning your process down their throat. So how are you tackling that and thinking about that nowadays?
It's a really good question, and something that I think as a small company going into from startup to scale up, how do we deal with that? And when you have a startup, you hire people from your network, the smartest people that you know, people that are recommended, and typically they have expertise in a particular area. So in many cases, that works great because they can own everything that they need to do, and probably more. The downside is that you then make the assumption that that person knows everything about everything. And so I think it becomes this interesting dynamic where for such a long time, sales has always pushed like, this is what we do, this is how we do it, this is why we do it. But there's that lack of customer feedback to help guide that process. And as you look at, we're an enterprise software sale. And as you look at what traditionally that has been, which is a BDR qualifies to a lead, someone says, I want a demo, then you have a conversation, then you eventually get the demo, then you have these follow-ups, right? There's this multi-step process where I think there's fatigue happening, where it's like, look, just get to the point. Like, I am obviously interested. I did my research before. And so how do we make sure that we understand as marketers and salespeople where the customer is in their journey? Because historically, customers didn't know where they were in the journey. They may be really early in the process, but companies like 6sense prove that many people are researching these topics well before you've even heard of them looking for you, or maybe even sometimes heard of them at all. And so a big focus for us is how can we align sales and marketing and product marketing in the middle to make sure that they're addressing some form of what the customer is looking for in that process. And I think that comes not only with setting expectations around what information the customer is going to get in whatever phone call that they have, but also that you're not just saying, here, let me tell you all about us, to where the customer's eyes glaze over and they're kind of like, this isn't what I was expecting to hear. So there's a lot of layers to that, but I think that the big thing that we've tried to take away is how can we focus on the right message so that we're keeping the customer engaged in any stage of that process.
For sure. And I think you highlighted a couple things there that hit home as a buyer. Like, we both bought software before, and there's nothing worse when you know, I've looked at 3 companies, I want one of you 3, I've done my research, and you just get banted to death at the start. And you're like, can we just skip this? So I think that's a good point, but then you're going to get the pushback from, and rightfully so in some cases, from sales and marketing of then how do we qualify so we're not burning expensive AE time? And that's a delicate balance. So how are you thinking through what to do there?
So we definitely have a qualification process, and it is easier when you're a smaller company because you have fewer leads, right? So Digibee is really well known in Brazil, but fairly unknown in the US, and we're obviously looking to change that. So now we can react in a unique way depending on what's coming in to the pipeline. But very shortly, if not already, we have to react in a way that makes sense. And I think one of the things that we've done is we have more of a focus on who we're targeting and what industry that they're in. So last year in 2022, we were thinking more broadly, anybody from any company that maybe was in the technology space. This year, we learned from last year around what our sweet spot is, particularly in the US market, because it's different than South America or anywhere else. And so we figured out that if we get this type of person that's reaching out with this title, this is typically where they are in their journey. And we're using a lot of tools to understand what part of their journey have they already been on. We can talk about how we've restructured our sales team for sure. But on the marketing side, it's you've expressed interest. Let me understand a little bit about what you're doing, and then let me book that demo for you. But most people aren't picking up the phone anymore or looking at the emails that you're sending them. So that time that you finally get them on a call or a video is really valuable, and you want to make the most of it. So a big piece of what we're doing is trying to educate the team that we have. We have that luxury because we're small. It won't scale as we grow.
Yeah, and I like the, maybe I'm reading between lines here, but the focus on shifting towards more hand raisers, people who have expressed interest versus the, you still want to get in front of your target 3,000 accounts, 4,000 accounts or whatever, but just hammering them over the head with phone calls and, emails that are templated. Is it safe to assume that that's the change really, is focusing on where they're at in the journey, providing the value, and then getting them to eventually come to you?
Absolutely. The goal is that we have people who are coming to us who are hand raising and saying, I'm ready. And you can track some way that they've engaged. They're on your email list, they've attended an event, there's some form, they've listened to your podcast, they've downloaded material, whatever it might be. That, I think, historically, marketers and sales individuals have reacted like, let me call them, let me hammer them, where it's like, hold on, like they're researching. They're in that research phase of trying to figure out what they want to do. They don't necessarily want to buy what you're selling yet. So as soon as they're ready to make that switch, I think what you want to do is make it as easy as possible to say, yeah, I'm ready for a call and I'm ready to self-select what I'm ready for. So we did try and pilot an opportunity where a prospect could say, I'm just looking for a little bit more information. Can someone hop on the phone now? I want more detailed information. Let's schedule 30 minutes. Or I'm ready for a demo. I'm ready to book that. And I think sort of reminds you of those books where you could pick your own journey. Yeah. But there's a lot of that feeling of customization, which is why personalization became really good and big in consumer goods. So the more we can do that in the sales process for B2B, the more successful I think we're going to be. And I think you're going to see that shift, particularly over time, as we look at a recession, a longer sales cycle. You're going to have to do that multiple times. But I do think that allowing people to pick their journey and where they are allows them to feel more ownership in the process.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Like you're talking about doing that on the marketing side, kind of when they're first reaching out to sales, but also in the sales follow-up, right? We're kind of at the point where we're all a little iffy on what 2023 is going to be like. And for me, at least, I feel like salespeople are being and should be more direct. So how do I want to reach out? How do you want me to reach out? What's the actual timeline here? Is it kicking the tires? Where are we at? So I think having those frank conversations, and also as someone, like we talked about this before, combining the three kind of arms of the revenue team, how are you thinking through that choose your own journey, customization, get on the same side of the buyer throughout the rest of the funnel after they've hand raised?
So after they've hand raised, I think our sales team has phenomenal experience in understanding what they do. When we look at the market that we're servicing, it's developers. So you have enterprise sales reps selling into a developer persona, which is every persona is unique in and of itself, but you've got a variety of different things where those two almost clash. Yeah. Because one is driving for efficiency and the other is trying to, understand and draw out information. One of the things that works really well in our process is that our pre-sales team is able to speak the same language as our persona. And so if we can align our sales teams to have a dedicated pre-sales resource, that has worked really successfully for us. So we've organized our team to be educated in the respective areas that make sense. So our sales team is educated on high level, what they're looking for. Maybe they can come and kind of meet the pre-sales individual at a technical level. But our product is a technology sale and is dedicated toward a SaaS product in integration, which is, I'm not buying that. So I think that when we've educated the teams in the right way and paired them together, that's when we've seen success. So that it's not a pre-sales engineer on every call, but it's a pre-sales engineer on the calls where there's an architect on the call ready to have that conversation that says, this is what I need to understand. And with our product, once we get them on the phone, it's very real that a developer says, I'm very interested, or an architect says, I understand the value you're providing. And we want to make sure that we have the person on the phone who can go toe to toe. So I think our salesperson in that phase of the process acts as a liaison for making sure that we understand the buying process, we understand the timelines, whereas having access to that pre-sales engineer allows them for that technical knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, and I think tying that specifically to hand raisers and having the sales engineer makes sense, because if you tried to do that on a 10-minute discovery call, cold outreach, developers sometimes like to get in the weeds and talk about the details, but even then they won't get the value at all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you're continuing that through to the CS side, because I think we're all, at least I can admit to this, we're focusing more on retention, given the economy. Like, we want to keep our customers and help them grow.
Yeah.
So how are you handling that as well, with balancing like the technical as well as providing that higher level, here's the ROI, here's the benefit?
So I think it's not a solved problem, I don't think, anywhere. But what I'll tell you is that we hire the best customer success team and resources that can understand, this is why you bought us. This is how we're going to help you, and let me lead you towards success and put all the right people in front of you. And one of the more tactical ways that we do that, and I'm not sure that this answers your question fully, but we can keep going.
Yeah.
One of the more tactical ways that we do that is having customer success involved before the deal gets signed. So that when you sort of see that, so there's a little bit of overlap. If you were to think of it like a Gantt chart, it's kind of, you've got that top line, this is the process, and then that CS person comes in maybe 3/4, 7/8 of the way through the deal, where you're saying, okay, this is coming in, but we also have the try and buy kind of concept. So renewal and retention are critical to our process. And the faster that we can get that person who's more based on the relationship and driving success, the better off that we've seen that. And our model involves, once they are a customer, once they have seen the value, we do something where we deliver for them, then we deliver it together, and then we make sure that that customer can go and run on their own. And I think that model is scalable and replicable, and I've seen that in many other cases. And that allows us to expand our contracts. And we've seen success globally in that kind of land and expand model with our technology, because very early on we're saying, well, what are you trying to drive? And we make sure that that message is consistent, so that the person on the receiving end, let's say that it's that architect, that developer, that integration specialist, doesn't have to repeat themselves. And we're making sure that that's carried through, checking in on a regular basis. But I think you have to make sure that your customer success and your sales team are in lockstep. And I think that that starts with having the same goals and targets and potentially structure.
Okay, so I definitely want to get into that topic, because that's an interesting one to me. But I think, the overarching theme here, though, is whether or not it's one actual revenue team or you're just working as a team as still separate departments, how important it is. Because I don't know how many times I've had someone do a discovery call on me, for a product I'm going to buy. And then the AE asks the same questions. And then I go through onboarding and I get asked the same question. And maybe it's me being petty and like getting annoyed by it, but it does wreck the experience a little bit, right? Those small things matter significantly nowadays.
Even if at the minimum, and we've said this to our teams before, you're verifying the information that you have, because it's in whatever system that you're using, right? It's listed there. It's in the notes. Hey, I know you talked with Joey. He said this. I just want to confirm XYZ. Did I miss anything? Even if it's just that level, it makes it so much more palatable, because you're right. Like, it's not, it irks me when I have to say it again. I'm like, I did this 2 days ago. Do you just want me to say it again? Do you want me to rephrase? Are you looking if I like have a different answer now? Is this a test? So I think we really try to make sure that even at a minimum where you're saying, okay, just re-verify that that's still the case, fine. But don't ask the same question. And, I tell my marketers the same thing. Don't go into a case study conversation cold, because it makes you sound like you don't care.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I just want to go back to the topic that we brought up before we miss it, because I think it's a good one, which is like incentivizing. You're having the same goals and potentially incentivizing in a similar way for probably marketing, CS, and sales, but specifically sales and CS we are talking about, as well as on the structure side. So do you want to expand there a little bit on what you meant?
Yeah, so I think it's important that people have the same objectives and they're all marching along the same path. For part of my career, and even moments, recently, it can sometimes, and I think everyone can appreciate this, it can sometimes feel like you're all tied to the same life raft and swimming in different directions.
Yeah.
And when you look at how you avoid that, I think it's about having clear objectives and clear leadership and guidance. And particularly at startups and scale-ups, the role of the chief revenue officer is becoming more relevant as we have a renewal retention-based team. And so companies, and I don't think anyone's gotten this right, we talked about this before, but companies are looking to align a revenue organization. Well, what is a revenue organization? It's everyone that's going from the first time that a prospect looks for you through someone when they decide that they're no longer going to be in a partnership with you, and that whole journey. So that's really just, it's more than sales. It's customer success and enablement and onboarding and support. And it's on the other end of that kind of funnel is marketing. So we're evaluating a structure that says that whole organization should be under one leader. And so it would be marketing, sales, and customer success under a chief revenue officer. And I think that's becoming more common as you look at SaaS companies, because I'll give you just a very tactical example. We're working on a new sales deck. And when I say we, marketing, product marketing. The sales team has said, yes, we want a new deck. But the goals are very different. Sales is saying, I want it to look better. Marketing and product marketing are saying, maybe we want to revise the message. The goal is ultimately the same, to have 100% of the people that see that deck convert to a demo, an SQL, an opportunity, whatever. So they're aligned toward the same goal, sort of, but they have different objectives that they're trying to achieve with those. And unless it's discussed, that can go very far down the wrong path. So when we bring it back to not just, oh, we're trying to hit a revenue target, but this is a specific task that we're trying to get to, it allows the product marketer to have a little bit more clout to say, yeah, you're really educated here and there's a lot of good content, but you're missing this point. Let's work together so that we can optimize what that flow looks like. So it's a really tactical example, but I think it articulates the point where if you have a sales leader and a marketing leader trying to do two different things, then that one project can sort of get off the rails. And so we're looking to align that whole revenue, because the journey of the customer through that whole process, again, end to end, from when they become a prospect to when they ultimately buy and rebuy your product, really matters. And this is based off of the winning by design methodology. You can't see behind me, but underneath there is the whole like winning by design suite of books. And it's that bow tie concept where it's not just the funnel that ends at once someone buys, but it's turning it on its side and saying, what does the full journey look like? And so we are trying to explore, and I don't know that there's a company out there that's done this, like I said before, successfully, but I think companies are trying, where can you align so that strategically those three resources and departments are working together as opposed to having different goals. And I think that's the where it's going to really melt together and be helpful. So we're going to try that. We're going to do that this year and think about how can we align those teams together under a single resource.
Nice. Yeah, that's kind of the like end goal nirvana we're all searching for, is this one team that actually works together. We're trying that as well. And as someone who, you know, past few roles were kind of VP marketing, now it's VP revenue, it's sales, marketing, and success. I've never actually understood our journey in customer as well as I have in this role because I'm overseeing it all, right? Yeah. And I didn't realize how siloed I might have been in old marketing roles. I thought I understood the whole picture, but I 100% didn't. Like, I wasn't joining as many sales calls. I wasn't doing pipeline review and like retention and CS review. So tons of benefits there. It's just hard juggling the tasks is kind of where I'm at.
I think for me, so you and I have different backgrounds. We haven't talked about this yet, but my background for the majority of my career was in product. And one of the things I prided myself on was, up until very recently, I was on the phone with at least a customer a day. At every level that I was in, there was somebody. I didn't care if they were complaining. I didn't care if they were happy. I didn't care if they were getting a demo, but I made it a point to make sure that the customer was always involved in my daily activity. And I took that and carried that over to marketing, albeit it's a little harder because we were setting up our marketing organization. So I fell out of that, but it comes back to making sure that you're keeping the customer in mind throughout that journey. And so if you fall away from that, you start marketing towards your salespeople as opposed to the target that you're looking after. So I think it's really hard to do that and to do it well. But if you remember and you define well who you're going after and what their experience has been, and you're willing to refine that, that's where I've seen the most success at really big organizations or at small organizations. And I think it's a pretty easy step to say, hey, I'm going to listen to that demo. I'm going to hear what that salesperson is saying. I'm going to understand, why did that one convert over the other one? And they were hearing the same story. Why did this customer renew? Why did this customer renew more? Right? So what's the difference? And because I think there are patterns there.
Yeah. And it's easier now to do that with Gong and Wingman and all these tools. It used to be, you know, you'd have to travel to a new territory and go on a little road show. And so we should be taking advantage of it. I think the one point I want to get your thoughts on this too, is kind of a last concept here, is something our CEO brought up when I was interviewing for this job and trying to figure it out, is he was trying to find someone to lead the revenue org, and he wanted a certain, he's called it DNA, but mix between marketing, sales, and kind of CS based on the goals of the company. Which to me was interesting. We're more marketing led, right? So my background's more marketing. There are some companies who are almost entirely sales led, like ZoomInfo, for example. Most of the revenues from sales. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, like if that's a valid concept, how you're thinking through that. Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
I mean, I think that my background is so different. When I took this job, I called a lot of my peers and former mentors, and I said, you know, I'm going from product to marketing. What do you think of that? And one of the things that stuck with me was the best marketers, and this is a quote from a Bill Campbell, if you're familiar with him. He was an executive coach for and leader for many different companies. But one of the things that he said was, train of thought. We can edit this. What was I going to say? My God. I started thinking about the book and I was going to reference it, and now my brain is shot. Oh my God. Shoot.
It was the switch from product to marketing, and
Yes, I got it. So one of the things that Bill said was, marketers have forgotten the first part of their title, which is product and why they're doing it. And so for me, my biggest gap right now is the sales background, right? But I do think that you have to have the customer and the product as you're thinking about moving forward into the revenue organization. And there's going to be positives and negatives to any background. But when I think about the role of a successful revenue organization. We are a sales-led company. Our sales are going to help us. We're not product-led growth or anything like that. We will take elements of that. And I think my philosophy has always been get the best person for the job, not necessarily that checks those boxes, because I think what you want to do is hire the best people for those roles and get butts and seats that are going to drive efficiency and effectiveness. And then you want to build that team so they're working together in this and rowing in the same direction. And I think having that right leadership where they understand the customer, they understand your product, then they can drive the revenue parts of the organization that make sense with the support that they need. But I don't think you start there. I think you grow into that, right? If I'm looking at a newer company, sub 250 people, I don't know that you can segment that way.
Yeah.
But I think the larger that you get, the more likely it is that you can have that alignment. But time will tell. I am very curious where the role of revenue and sales goes as companies evolve, because that retention is such a crucial part of sales that I don't think anyone's gotten it right yet. And we're all going to test and learn. And in 10 years, we'll be talking about what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, we're all figuring it out. And it's one of those things too, like the pandemic made us make a bunch of changes to marketing and sales. And then now this, is it a recession? Is it not? What's going to happen is having us make additional changes. So we're getting our hands forced. I do feel like since 2020, it's been about 15 years of change, which is probably a good thing. So
I think we needed it.
There.
I think we needed it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Cait, thanks for the conversation. I enjoyed it. If people want to connect, learn more, where should they go?
So they can find me on LinkedIn for sure. It's just Cait Porte. So CAIT is the funky way to spell that, and PORTE. And you can get me at Gmail or on LinkedIn. Happy to help.
Awesome. Cool. So we'll add those to the show notes. And Cait, thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. My key takeaway is just the importance of having marketing more involved on the post-sales side. They need to be part of the entire customer lifecycle. Otherwise, as Cait said, they end up being so far from the customer and they end up marketing to their sales team instead of their customer. If you enjoyed this episode, please click subscribe or leave us a review, and I'll be back every Tuesday with a new episode. See you then.